It's Thursday, October 6th. This is The Big Story. I'm Haryanto Diman. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you will not miss an episode. We begin with tragic news of a mass shooting at a children's daycare center in Thailand, where at least 34 people were killed, 22 of them children. At least 12 others were injured. The victims included children as young as 2 years old, now these according to a local police official. About 30 children were at the center when the gunmen came in at around lunchtime. The shooting occurred in Nong Bua Lampu, a northeastern province of Thailand. Thai police said the gunman was an ex-police officer who was discharged from the force last year for drug-related reasons. He later killed his wife and child before shooting himself dead. Thai Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha labelled the killing as shocking and has taken to Facebook to express his condolences to the families of those hurt or killed. The Nong Bua Lampu Hospital has issued an urgent announcement requesting donation of all blood types. Now we will have more on this story as it develops. In other news, whether you are a worker, a student or a holiday maker with plans to cross the border between Singapore and Malaysia, there is now one more item on your to-do checklist. Effective immediately, travellers arriving in or leaving Malaysia will have to fill in customs declaration forms after a letter dated September 5th by the Royal Malaysian Customs Department stated the requirement. Travellers must declare all dutiable or prohibited goods in his possession, either on his person or in any baggage or vehicle. In line with this, all airlines entering Malaysia had been asked to announce the requirement to all passengers on board. No reasons were given for the resumption of this practice, which was stopped many years ago. Previously, only a verbal declaration was required. Will Malaysia hold a snap election this year? Well, we could know soon after today's meeting between Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob and the King. Mr. Ismail Sabri said he may discuss the dissolution of Parliament in his audience with the King, but refused to comment whether these would leave the scheduled budget announcement tomorrow moot. Joining me now from Kuala Lumpur is Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teoh. Shannon, what are the possible outcomes following the meeting between the King and Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob?
Well, of course, we could see an immediate announcement that Parliament has been dissolved. And, technically speaking, that's actually something that can happen after any audience. But of course, there is added speculation this time around because of events of the past week, where the opposing faction in the Prime Minister's own party, UMNO, they've been ramping up pressure on him to hold an election this year. Now, specifically speaking, though, for this evening's meeting, this is a pre-cabinet meeting, right? And it happens every week. And this is coming the day before the budget. So the Prime Minister was at the Finance Ministry at about lunchtime today for a final meeting on the budget. And it's likely there'll be a fair bit of discussion between the Prime Minister and the King on the budget itself, of course. And, when speaking to reporters after that meeting at the Finance Ministry, the Prime Minister seemed to want to keep all of us on tenterhooks, saying if he tells us whether the budget is going to be tabled tomorrow, then there won't be any more suspense, right? And he said, if the discussion on the cabinet matters takes up to the Maghrib prayers at 7 p.m., then there won't be time to discuss dissolution. I mean, even the quote itself, which says that they may discuss dissolution, it was kind of playful. So I'm not sure how much seriousness we should give to this. But again, the possibility is there. There's also very much a possibility that Ismail, the Prime Minister, could propose a dissolution, but the King will say, let me think about it. And instead of giving an outright yes or no, right? In the past, he has referred to the Council of Rulers. Now, this is made up of all 9 state monarchs in Malaysia before deciding on important matters like this. So he could say, okay, I hear you, but I want to go and speak to my fellow rulers before coming to a decision. Ismail could even mean from what he said today that, he was not going to ask the King to dissolve today, but he would be asking the King to what he thought about maybe dissolving now, next week, next month. There's quite a plethora of possibilities here.
Shannon, say the King does give his consent to dissolve Parliament, whenever that may be, like you mentioned, which will then mean an election can be called. Take us through the steps and timeline leading up to the election.
Well, once an announcement is made, making official that Parliament is dissolved, the first thing that happens is that the Election Commission will have to meet and they have to decide when polls will be. In the past, it's pretty quick in the next few days for a general election. So the only rule here is that the vote has to happen, the election itself, within 60 days of dissolution. Now, to give you an idea, if that happens today, if it is actually dissolved today, then Malaysians must vote by December 4th or something, early December, right? So typically there's up to 2 weeks of official campaigning, usually 10 to 14 days of campaigning after nomination day. And then you add before that another fortnight or so from when the Election Commission meets to when nomination day is, because, the Election Commission has to prepare, the parties themselves have to get themselves in order and so on and so forth. So if you count all that up, we're talking about maybe 4 to 5 weeks before polls are held. That's what typically happens. But do bear in mind, in 2004 and 1999, it took less than 3 weeks from dissolution to the election day. The situation in 1999 is especially relevant because back then Tun Mahathir, then Datuk Sri Mahathir Mohamad, the Prime Minister then, their government had also tabled a budget, and then while it was being debated, they dissolved it, right, in November. And in that situation, an election needed to be held as soon as possible. So a new government could then pass a supply bill in December. If not, in January, civil servants don't get their salary.
Shannon, just quickly on the budget presentation planned for tomorrow, what do you expect from it and how might it set the stage for the election to come?
So the joke nowadays is that everyone is saying if the budget is tabled, but we'll use the same phrasing. If the budget is tabled, there's a lot of expectation that it will be an election budget, so to speak, filled with goodies, handouts, populist measures, all that. But from what we've been told in briefings with the finance ministry, when you see the finance minister events, when people ask questions, even with the central bank and other kind of officials, economists, analysts all around, the sense is that the government can't just keep spending like how it did in the past 2 to 3 years, during the COVID time, 2020 up to this year. The government has been racking up huge deficits, more than 6% of the GDP. So at that time, I think the markets, the rating agencies, they kind of gave pretty much every country in the world a bit of leeway. You can spend, to fend off a recession. But they are going to be watching to see what Malaysia does when things kind of return to normal in that sense. There's no more COVID. Are you going to be disciplined? Are you going to practice some restraint? So I think it's going to be somewhere in between. There is an expectation. I think market watchers will say, yeah, the election's coming. You expect the government to spend, but you don't expect the government to spend like it did in the past 2 years. So it's going to fall somewhere in between. I think there's going to be cutting of fat. Some of the programs which has been a bit, overboard, like, Malaysia's subsidy program. We are spending close to 80 billion ringgit this year alone. I think that's going to be cut back. It's going to be retargeted. So it's got to be very strategic, this budget. If it is going to be an election budget, then it's got to be very strategic, really kind of focus the so-called populist measures at the right vote banks.
Shannon, thank you for the perspectives, as is Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teoh. Back home, million-dollar HDB flats used to be a rare occurrence but are now increasingly common, and last month a record 45 flats changed hands for over $1 million. These flats made up 1.7% of last month's total resale transactions, estimated to be at 2,589 units. Kallang Whampoa recorded the most number of million-dollar flats sold with 7, followed by Bishan and Bukit Merah with 6 units each. Among other popular areas, both Ang Mo Kio and Toa Payoh also had multiple million-dollar transactions. Meanwhile, Punggol saw its first $1 million flat with a loft unit transacting at $1.198 million. HDB resale prices also grew at a faster rate of 1.2% in September compared to August's 0.4%. The rising number of $1 million HDB flats plus rising HDB resale prices prompted a fresh round of property cooling measures, but analysts say it will take some time for the full effects to be reflected in flat prices and transaction volumes. Come the new school year in 2023, 70 schools will have new principals. This is one of the biggest scale changes in recent years. Of the 70, 26 will be newly appointed first-time principals. The 70 schools to get new principals include National Junior College, Nanyang Girls High School and Henry Park Primary School, as well as new merger schools like Newtown Secondary School and Chua Chu Kang Secondary School. Two types of mee sedap products are being recalled due to the presence of a pesticide: Korean spicy soup instant noodles and Korean spicy chicken instant noodles. The Singapore Food Agency is currently testing other mee sedap instant noodle products. Those are top stories today. Visit straitstimes.com for more news and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by clicking the red button below. I'm Haryanto Diman. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.